I'm just curious, could you say a little bit more about how do you think, if you generalize around what the Supreme Leader did, right?
Yeah.
But how do you interpret that, right? I don't think we got to conclude how you think about it. I think of it as allowing emergent behavior to be designed by players.
Yeah.
What's your view?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's totally right. I think OPCraft actually didn't have a sound physics, so you couldn't make faster trains in OPCraft. There was no way to build better tools. Everything was kind of like created by us, or hard-coded by us. But the layer that was exposed is the social layer. So people speed-run civilization, essentially. At the beginning, they added barter and then trade, and then they went all the way to government in 10 days. So I think that what it shows, as you said, is just emergence will happen if you have those systems being open and programmable. And now the real tricky part is how do you define the rules in such a way that people can make faster trains? Like can go beyond just the social and economic layer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cool. Tyler.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe I should just quickly introduce myself and who I am. So I am Tyler. I am a co-founder of Clockwork Labs. We sort of come from the more traditional distributed systems and game space. So we're developing an MMORPG called Bitcraft Online. Despite the name, it's actually not a blockchain or Web3 game. It is a sort of traditional MMORPG. And the point of Bitcraft is to sort of have players in a sandbox world, kind of like OPCraft, rebuild civilization up from the ground up and collaborate with each other. And in order to do this, we have developed a system which is as yet unannounced, but we're going to make it available to other people probably early next year, which started as a technology that was inspired by distributed systems that you would normally run for games and for databases. But at some point we looked at it and we thought, this is essentially a smart contract system. It just happens to be a centralized one. And so what I think about, what is interesting about all of this is, if you're going to trade off a little bit of the sovereignty, what can you get in terms of performance and actually speed? And so how could you take something like OPCraft and the movement in OPCraft, if I'm not mistaken, is actually not
It's peer-to-peer. It's not on-chain, yeah.
So, but also put all the movement and really everything so that truly you can have everything work through there and that there are no servers at all. And could you have, an autonomous computer which is not as autonomous or sovereign as Ethereum, but at least as autonomous and sovereign as AWS? And kind of what could you build on top of that?
Yeah. So let's zoom back a little bit. Why are the three of us here? Like, how did the two of you meet? And what is it that you're working on that, what's in common, shared in common between what you two are working on?
You want to give the story?
Sure, yeah, I'll give the story. Well, I'll give my side of the story at least. Yeah. That's what I know. So we had been developing the system. We told Eddie about it. We felt very strongly that this was a thing. The developer experience for Ethereum, in some sense, is much better than the traditional AWS developer experience. If you think about it, what you do is you write your program, you upload it to Ethereum, and you're done. Whereas in AWS, you got to start by creating a bunch of accounts, and then permissions, and then services, and blah, blah, blah. And we just wanted to bring that developer experience to people. And I was talking about the power of this and what you could do and have programmable games where players can actually upload their own logic and interact with the game APIs directly and access the game data and so on. And Eddie said, you sound just like this other person I know, but who comes from the very, very sort of decentralized space. You guys should meet. And so we ended up having dinner and talking about all this stuff. It's really quite interesting. I'd be curious to hear sort of your side of that one.
Yeah, I mean, it was very similar. Eddie was like, you should talk to this guy. So he brought us together for dinner in San Francisco, and then we just jammed for a very long time. Actually, Tyler is in the same office we're in London. So he brought his friend working on the database, and they came to London with us, where we kind of like have this little residency of people building that kind of stuff. They're the evil force of the residency. They keep trying to convince people to give up autonomy for power. It's kind of like the Darth Vader of autonomous worlds, at least the emperor.
Yes, it's a bit of a yin and yang situation.
Yin and yang. It's really important to bring the balance. But I think there's a lot of synergy between those systems. I think that, so as an example, to like be very intellectually honest, OPCraft would cap right now with current technology 700 to 1,000 transactions per second. Transaction being putting a block down, breaking a block. with movement right now, because we do it with a different system, the reason we can do it with a different system is because actually movement doesn't matter in the OPCraft physics. OPCraft, you can build and drop blocks anywhere you want, actually. Like, the chain doesn't know where you are. We had a version where the chain would know where you are, but now we have additional throughput because that needs to be secured as well by the consensus. Whereas Tyler's system, I mean, it's what? Like, give the quotes. I don't want to give the number.
We are targeting in a single shard, essentially, 1 million transactions per second with extremely low latencies, like 50 microseconds. Yeah. And so it ends up being somewhere like 1 million times faster than Ethereum and about 1 trillion.
1,000.
So, well, yeah, in your case, yes, depending on how you do your rollups, but about 1 trillion times cheaper as well. So that's the question is, what could you do? They're answering the question of sort of what could you do with maximum sovereignty. Yeah. We're asking what could you do with maximum performance, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Interestingly, I think I really appreciate both the projects as kind of cases of convergent evolution, right? Two different approaches to solving a very similar set of issues that arrived at a sort of similar architecture. I think it's really interesting to highlight the two kind of key benefits of this design pattern, right? The first, which you just discussed, is the programmer's experience, right? The game developer's experience.
Right.
The fact that you can collapse the application server and the data layer, the persistence layer, into the same thing, and to represent all the business logic in one machine that the developer doesn't even control in some cases, is a really, really interesting design pattern that I think has a lot of benefits regardless of autonomy, the sort of sovereignty characteristic. But then the second characteristic is autonomy, right? Which I think has really, really interesting consequences for permissionless innovation, for the size of the economy that can form, for the willingness to invest and to develop interesting, consequential, interconnected things. And it's interesting that your project, Tyler, is very vigorously exploring the first.
Correct.
Whereas I think, Justin, your project is exploring both.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Certainly, and I would sort of stress that the sovereignty and autonomy thing is really a sliding scale, and it's not a question of do I choose this or do I choose that, but it's really what can I put in these different spaces, right? So in our case, movement, you could have that be part of the physics, and yes, you may have to trust one party, or depending on roll-up technology, you might not, but maybe that's fine to do, but maybe you don't want your items to be in that same system, and you can sort of upgrade your sovereignty for that and get a lot of the same benefits all in sort of one world.
Yeah. Could we go through like a concrete example of what does the programming experience look like, or what would it look like, in its final state for someone who's a player who wants to be a little bit deeper and wants to add a specific functionality to the game? Like, how do they think about that versus the ways you could do that today with like a mod or with a platform like specifically designed with some of these characteristics like a Roblox or something like that?
Before we answer, I would like to just so mods fracture realities. Because a mod is like, you say, here are my rules, but you don't actually put those rules on top of the existing world. You say, I'm creating a new world with those rules. And sometimes you have illusion of different rule sets being in the same world. Like if you think about like Roblox or the sandbox or whatever, those are super cool, but ultimately they're different rule sets fractured, where you go from a rule set to another and the rules change, right? So, whereas like, I think another word that is pretty useful is the idea of minigames. In a lot of Minecraft servers, people actually build minigames using the rules of Minecraft that you can play, like I'll break the blocks under like your feet so you fall in lava. And that's kind of interesting because it's akin to tennis here. We respect the physics when we play tennis, but we created another layer of playfulness and rules on top of what already exists, right? So you just want to draw the difference between mods and minigames.
Right. Like, to play a mod, you need to typically either modify your client and reload the game, or join a specific game server.
Well, you don't play in the same reality anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things is sort of, it's related to that, but it's sort of being able to mod the data itself, right? So typically when you create a mod, you sort of create a new game, and you're treating it more as like entirely just a game engine. You're going to create your own separate thing. In this case, you can add functionality to the existing world's data, right? So, and the other interesting thing about that is if this logic is running in the same way that your game is running, you can actually call out to third-party things. So normally, let's say, I mean, game servers have APIs. People could use those APIs. You could make arbitrarily complex APIs. It's very difficult to make them secure, but let's say you did that. The problem is that the game developer can't really rely on anyone else's service because it's not running sort of in some sense autonomously. Whereas if you can have your players actually upload this, you might have someone create a marketplace, for example, that you as the game developer actually call out to, rather than just the one-way direction.
Because you don't have to expect another services to be up and running. It's running in the game itself.
Correct. So yes, and so you can trust that it will be available for you to actually use. So that's like just a fundamentally different aspect of how you could do that.
But to actually answer Eddie's question,
sure.
Not that you didn't, but like I wanna answer the questions. So to answer Eddie's question, how would this look like? Well, you could have something like, I'm a player, I have an inventory of things. I'm in a world where there is no notion of barter or trade, but I can deploy a code inside the universe, right? Using Tyler systems or like the EVM or like whatever, it doesn't actually matter. The way you would do it is you would say, hey, write some code that says, if someone comes close to like the place where the code lives, because it's probably embodied at a specific location, they can give me one wool and I give them one piece of wood. And then you say, hey, this program can use my inventory, I delegate my inventory to this program, and then you just press upload, and that program goes to a database, goes to a peer-to-peer network, and then it's just up all the time. You don't have to keep your computer up or like pay for some cloud hosting or whatever. Now if a player shows up there, if there is some discoverability layer so they can find those programs, they know, and they can look at the code, because that's also the really interesting thing. It's not an opaque kind of like magical box that will do something if you press it. You actually know what's going to happen. So that gives a totally different layer of like trust into the system. So you look at this box, a player would look at this box and say, if I give a wool, it gives me a piece of wood. So I give a wool and I get a piece of wood because that program has like delegated access to the inventory. And that's probably how it would look like. Just the same way you make game actions, you just send little pieces of logic.
Yeah. And then I guess as sort of an extension on that, that's sort of assuming that only players are the ones who would want to add these things. But you could have other developers who are building whole experiences on top of the same sort of substrate. And have sort of co-built applications, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Which is what Roblox does in some sense, but just a much more open way.
Well, the thing that's interesting with Roblox is because it's fractured realities. Like, two games are actually never really, they don't share the same reality. Yes, you can move your avatar from one place to another, share the same name, but those are fundamentally different things. Right. Whereas again, in this universe, like I can play tennis with Tyler, and then someone can drive a car really fast, and they can start drifting and lightly, not kill us, that would be very gory, but like lightly touch the tennis court, and those two things actually interact with each other, even if we didn't commit to an interface or some standard or whatever, because they're based on the same reality.
Let me ask a difficult one. We only have a couple minutes left, but I want to ask a challenging one. How do you imagine so far, for both these cases, and there may actually be a big difference between a programmable world and an autonomous world, how does this affect business models for game developers, for modders, for the people around games who extend and modify them?
That's a great question. I'm gonna have Justin go first while I.
Cool. So one way I think about it is that the thing that's interesting with running a world is that you can leave a lot of money on the table. And that means that, because think about it this way. If you run a world and then you capture some value from just the infrastructure that is used to run the world, you don't actually capture like percentages of financial transaction on it. You just do like Ethereum, like you sell block space. It's a big market. Like Ethereum again sells $100 million worth of block space per year. So you just sell block space. The thing that is interesting is now people can come on top and build entire businesses without depending on like a 30% cut that you could change over time, or like them being banned from the platform or something like that. So that might actually create worlds where instead of fracture, because two very powerful players decide to create two worlds because they can't trust each other, they all build on top of the same substrate.
In other words, when the game is a platform,
yes,
right, then people can build applications that interoperate with each other, which is not really the way that games work today.
No.
Right? I think this business model, I'll hand it to you in a second, Tyler, but I think the business model question is really important because games have always changed radically in response to new business models.
Right.
The way that we've seen games unfold has been, on the one hand, changes in computing technology and improvements in computing technology, and on the other hand, changes in adaptations in business models. And some might argue that the business models have been more influential in the types of games and the games ecosystem we've seen. So I think it's really interesting to consider what can change. What do you think, Tyler?
I have 2 points. So I think one, and this is the one that's not really talked about enough, is this way of writing applications, be it on-chain or not on-chain in some centralized system, is so much easier to do than creating the distributed systems yourself that would be able to run it. So what we're going to potentially be able to do with this is really open up the number of developers who can actually make their own MMORPGs, right? if you don't have to deal with all the networking and all the state synchronization and all of the crazy, crazy permissioning that you would need to do in an MMORPG, you can make this accessible to someone who possibly even doesn't really know how to program. You can even have a visual UI for manipulating these contracts.
That's cool.
and bring it to them. And then I think the other thing that it enables is, because these games are so massive and complicated to create, you're giving players and developers the opportunity to come in and build a sort of a horizontal slice or a vertical slice and create a larger game from it. Like, actually building an MMORPG, I know from personal experience, is a very significant undertaking. And I think it'll really open up the ways that people can contribute to build a greater whole.
That's great. And roughly speaking, when can we expect to see more from your projects?
Certainly.
If you can't commit, it's okay.
I will commit.
It's open source. You can check it out.
So for our database, we're going to be announcing it early to mid next year. And there will certainly be open source components of it, if not entirely open source, but I will not commit to that right now. And it should be available to start developing around then, so we'll post it.
One very last point. So the thing that Tyler just outlined, saying like, oh no, anyone can build their MMORPG, it's actually really interesting because like we know, okay, so the same thing happened with blockchain. Like now, like I don't know if you folks know Rare Capital. It's a bunch of 16 years old that built a DeFi protocol that was holding $1 billion in TVL. So now, like what DeFi are like finance-like autonomous physics brought to the world, which is like now you can run financial operations at scale because you have all the system is there for you. Using that kind of stuff, now you'll have the same kind of effect happening, but for like worlds, essentially. Now you can run worlds at scale without having to like know the entire stack.
You can have game designers making these things rather than like hardened distributed systems engineers. I think that's just a totally different business model. So.
All right. Well, I think we're totally out of time, so thank you so much, Justin and Tyler.
Oh, questions.
Cool.
Okay.
So if you have questions for these gentlemen, please raise your hand and we'll collect both those questions now and then we'll answer them. One here in the front. Not planted, I promise. And there's one more at the very back there. Go for it.
Can we get the mics on?
Hello. Here, use this one.
Amazing talk, guys. Thank you. In the case of autonomous agents in some of these worlds, in persistent worlds, you know, they'll keep on doing their thing.
Yeah.
How do you imagine, what are some of the systems in which those autonomous agents get funded over time? You know, given that every action they take is a transaction on the blockchain, if it's not actually somebody coming in and playing the game, but it's an autonomous agent just going about their way of life, what are some of the challenges and ways that you can fund that?
Yeah, we actually had a model for this. You can have a group of dragons that goes around and like just like takes over villages, and then if people pay for their gas, they just give them future rewards. Like, you can invest into our operations autonomously. They give us some money, we'll pay for transaction with this, and we'll give you future rewards. And actually, those things becomes really scary because you have autonomous agents that can't get stopped. They become lore in the game itself. Like, imagine a final boss that was not created by the developers. It's like a massive thing that just roams around and become more powerful over time.
So I think our strategy is just to make it so fantastically cheap that you could have the developer just throw $100 in and have that run for a very, very long time, right? Just so cheap, it's sort of regular cloud prices.